This isn't just things in our history book. People, neighborhoods, communities are still dealing with the things that were done not too many decades ago.
I wouldn't say I can relate with everyone here, but at least I can know like where they're coming from, and like I can see their viewpoint.
I'm not going to agree with everything somebody says, and they're not going to agree with everything I say, but I think it's nice to lock in with different cultures and see how different people see things.
Sometimes presence is necessary, sometimes prayer is necessary. What I have learned is when things get rough, we come together.
Black history is American history. We're all a part of this together.
Tonight, join us as we turn the spotlight on Black history. Good evening. I'm Larry Smith, coming to you from the historic Lyric Theater in downtown Lexington. You know, it is impossible to sum up in just 1/2 hour the important contributions African Americans have made in Kentucky. But tonight, we'll try to spotlight the past, the present, and the future leaders who make this Commonwealth great. Black people have laid the groundwork in many of the industries that make our Commonwealth great. The first jockey to win the Kentucky Derby was a black man, Oliver Lewis. In fact, 13 of the 15 jockeys in the first Kentucky Derby were black. 15 of the first 28 Derby winners were ridden by black jockeys. And let's not forget, it was an enslaved African-American from Louisville who taught Jack Daniels how to distill whiskey. And earlier this week, we introduced you to Elmer Louise Allen. She was the first black chemist at Brown-Forman. As you can see, Kentucky has an amazing past with some great leaders who got us to this point. But the work is never done. And I was fortunate enough to sit down with two of this generation's leading voices, two young men ready to tackle Kentucky's social justice issues, Devine Carama and Mario Radford. Got to take me back to where, in terms of Black History Month, when you first were aware as a youngster about black history.
My parents were very instrumental in making sure that it was always in the fabric of conversation. I remember growing up watching like the Martin Luther King shows. There was a show, and I remember it would start off go doom 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 doom. You know, it was always scary. but we always. My mom was a educator as well, so making sure that we knew who we were, and making sure that she had the conversations that we might not have had in school. So I was very aware of people beyond just what we consider maybe the 5 popular people. You know, she was always saying who did this or who did that. So as long as I can remember, I've always known. I can't remember not having a conversation about that.
Yeah, same. I think with my parents, what was unique with them is they incorporated a lot of their own history, their own experiences when talking about black history. And so my mother remembers when the schools were segregated and when they were desegregated and when she was bused to the other side of town. My dad talked about coming home from Vietnam, fighting for his country, but then he goes to a bar outside of Atlanta. They serve his army buddies, but they refuse to serve him. And so my history and the challenges that so many of my ancestors had to deal with, my parents were able to explain those through their personal experiences, and so it hit a little different. But then also, kind of like Mario, my mother was really big on reading, and so I had several books, I mean as young as 5, 6 years old, reading and learning about the layered history of our people. So when I went to school, I found myself in elementary school almost combative with what we were learning because it didn't feel full. It didn't feel as authentic because it was in my DNA to know and understand what my true history was. And so definitely as a child, growing up at home was my first experience kind of learning about what black history is and why it's important.
How did that experience shape the way you saw things and in the direction you wanted to go in?
Yeah, I think for me, it emboldened me, right? It inspired me. Because I felt like when we learned about my history in school, it leaned and weighted a little bit more to the atrocities, whereas at home, it leaned more towards us overcoming those atrocities. So for me, I was looking at all of these figures that I was reading about, learning about, being told about from my parents, some famous, some just in my parents' neighborhood, and it made me be like, man, I want to be looked at like that one day. Like, whatever the issues are of my time, I want to make a difference. So maybe kids will be inspired by me, like I am by so many of our ancestors. So I felt inspired and motivated.
I feel the same, that it gave me, beyond the books, seeing the community, present-day examples of older men that were doing things, or older women doing things in the community or in the city, that made you look at them and say, I wonder where they came up with that, or I wonder what makes them do that, or hearing them have conversations about the things that were going on in the city. The place that I was raised in, Greenville, Kentucky, I remember hearing conversations about how at the courthouse that the KKK would come by and what they would do during those times, and just to take it outside of television and books and know that there were certain places that you couldn't go around, or certain places that I remember a time we couldn't go there. I remember a time. And to see how they had overcome, and to see how they were still fighting for that, caused me to be, and my dad as well is one of those that if you don't want to know the truth, don't ask him. But it was a reminder that if you are really going to be making change, you have to say something and you have to do something.
You both now are so integral in the Lexington community as a whole, as well as the African American community. Give me examples that you see where we as African Americans have grown now from maybe 20, 30 years ago.
You know, when there were certain things that were going on in COVID, it wasn't just isolated to one city or isolated to one state. You were seeing different demonstrations everywhere. So I believe now, not saying that people stop fighting, but now the fight is different, and that people are taking it in a better, making their voices heard in a different way, whether it be on social media, whether that's, you know, you see more younger people involved. So I think that it's not just, and I'll say this as well. In the earlier years, you saw a lot of the movements isolated to or starting through church. Now it's not just limited or isolated to a religious sector. Now you see it's in all different types of areas of people that are mobilizing, that are not waiting on a particular pastor to lead the movement. That is all types of people that are involved and engaged.
Yeah, I would piggyback off what Mario said, that I think 20, 30 years ago, it was the black faith leaders who were leading the movement, and that were kind of the central source of inspiration for the black community. But I think now, with the explosion of hip-hop culture, which is where I come from, you look at social media influencers, you look at the way that we consume media now, leadership looks different. You know, we still need our faith leaders. They're still a huge, intricate part, but there's also other sources of leadership that these kids can draw from. But then I think the other space that I've seen change just since I was in high school 20-some years ago. That's crazy to say that. I would say that we are no longer, nor do we have to be, monolith in how we feel about these issues as a community. I think 20, 30, even 40 years ago, we had to be lockstep in everything. Whether we agree with it or not, we couldn't risk having a different thought or perspective or strategy, because it would be weaponized against us and it could cost the whole movement. But I think our ancestors paid a price to get us to a place where now we can have this diverse, truly intellectual conversation about these issues, where we all don't have to be in the same political party. We all don't have to believe the same things in order for us to be prevalent and have a conversation. And I think that will better perfect us as a society, as a community, but then also you create a truly diverse space for more black leaders to come up. And so I see that as one of the biggest changes today.
I agree. I don't want to talk about when I graduated. But.
Hey, I got both y'all, so we ain't going to talk about that. At what point in your adult life did you say, I'm going to take this and go down this path because I see where I can help the community do this?
I'm not saying this is everybody's path. I'm just telling you for me. For me, to be honest, it is when I stopped trying to decide what my next step would be and when I truly gave it to God. When I started to allow him to lead and me just follow his lead, that's when I began to find kind of my niche in this bigger collective of folks that are considered leaders or whatever in Lexington. For me, I don't have a lot of aspirations. I don't have a ton of goals. For me, it's just, God, what do you want me to do? I try to keep my ear to his voice, and whatever that is, I do that. So regardless of somebody's faith, I think what they can draw from that is that all of us have unique gifts and talents. All of us were created specifically to do something that nobody else could do. And so I think just as a community, right, we're so multifaceted. If we stop looking on the internet for cues, if we stop trying to be like the next person and we just kind of embrace our own uniqueness and beauty, I know that sounds corny, but I think that is where we start to embolden and empower that next generation of leaders who will be at their best. And they'll be at their best if they're operating in their gifts and talents. And so I think for me, it was me taking a step back and truly allowing God to work in my life for me.
I wish I could say that I had like a dream day, like I have a dream and this happened and this is the path that was clear. I believe the path continues to choose. Like it's not just one set thing that caused this is the direction I want to go forever, but I think that every moment causes for there to be a path that's chosen, whatever it is, every season. And I think, as he mentioned as well, as we continue to embrace whatever that looks like for us in that season, that I think that's the greatest path to the obedience for that moment. There are some people, like, even during the protest times, there are people who were not out there necessarily in the street protesting, but either counseling those people who were protesting, supporting those financially, praying for those, being an advisor for those. And I think that those roles are just as important because everybody can't be behind the megaphone.
Don't you think, too, that's where probably the biggest change, maybe the last 10, 15 years, I think before, and again, I've got a few years on you guys, remember before, it was like, well, if you're not out there, then you're not part of it. And that's kind of unfair to your point that you can't have every single person there. Everyone has their part that they do in the bigger picture. Doesn't always mean you're carrying a picket sign. Even though you're not carrying a sign doesn't mean you're not fully in for the cause.
Yeah, and I think that's important because a lot of times we felt there are some people who are, and I know as far as even in the lane of pastoring and preachers and leaders, they have a great sense and call for civic issues and social things that are going on, and they can interweave it into their messages and stuff like that. Martin Luther King was an example, and many others, Al Sharpton and many others. But then there are those who try to do that and they don't have the call. They're just trying to be relevant or trying to make sure that, that their people feel like they're still, whatever. But making sure that you support those who are, because I remember at our particular church, there were those who were out there. I would show up at different things, but there were those who were like in conversations and doing all different types of things, and they would ask for advice on what should they do. Whenever I was like, you know what, I don't necessarily know what to tell you, but I know who can. My job was to be a bridge of support, or usher, as I kept saying earlier, to open the door. And you opening the door or being a connector is just as important as you being out there, because what would it sound like if I have a microphone or the megaphone and I don't have the words to say? Then I messed up a moment. Versus I won't get in the way of that. What I will do is support it.
Yeah. What he said. I have nothing to add.
When we come back, what's the next step for these Lexington leaders? We talk with them about what they see as the biggest issues facing our community now. There's no question taking on a leadership role is an immense challenge, and the pitfalls and the obstacles are real. So the question is, what issues stand in the forefront right now as we move forward and look to the future? Well, I pose that question once again to Devine Carama and Mario Radford. What do you envision moving forward in terms of the movement, Black history, still civil rights, there's still fights going on, the fight is not over. Where do you envision this movement going from here?
So where I envision this movement going, it's a lot of different places, but I'm going to focus on one because I feel the time deserves this kind of intentional focus. I feel like our history in a lot of ways is being attacked right now. And even some of the progress that so many of our ancestors fought for. So when we talk about DEI, when we talk about curriculum, when we talk about things that could provide context for all races on our history, which could help us to have a more inclusive and unified future, is being attacked right now. So I think people need to wake up. This is really happening. There are a lot of people in this world that want to sweep under the rug some of the things that were done not even 100 years ago. And that trauma is still very, very prevalent in a lot of people who are alive and breathing today. This isn't just things in our history book. People, neighborhoods, communities are still dealing with the things that were done not so many decades ago. I think we need a quick pause and truly assess what is happening right now. And I think energy and efforts to combat that needs to happen, or else a lot of the progress that we made, we might start seeing steps backwards, and we can't afford that. So,
what I have learned is when things get rough, we come together. I feel that there is a time of community coming back. We've been in communities, but we haven't lived as community because we're all being attacked. And we need to fight this, and we can't fight this alone. And I do believe that whatever you call it, and however you as long as we're on the same team, as long as we're in the same, we're coming together, we're fighting the same issues. So I do believe that that is where the movement is becoming more personal than it is becoming organizational. It's becoming personal to all of us. We're saying, all right, I'm sick of the organization waiting on them to make a statement. I'm going to the school right now. Where's the principal?
Yeah. I appreciate your time, both of you. Thank you for all that you're doing in the community, and we can't wait to see the next steps and be right there to tell your story as it happens.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. So what now? While America has moved forward, there are still issues and challenges that exist within the fabric of our nation. But there are already young leaders ready to step up to the challenge and tackle those issues head on. We had a chance to meet with some young leaders from Henry Clay High School who say there is still much work to be done. I spent some time with 4 leaders at Henry Clay High School in Lexington earlier this month. 3 seniors and a junior from 4 very different backgrounds, all involved in more clubs and activities than we could name here, and all playing important roles in their school's community. I asked them what Black History Month has taught them.
It kind of helps me to learn that, like, Black history is American history, and that, you know, like, we're all a part of this together.
It helped me realize how much Black people have done for America, and as I move forward, I see people that look like me doing the same things that I want to do.
And I feel like if you're just going to talk to someone, I feel like a lot of people just want to be heard.
Mo Adour moved to the U.S. from Senegal at age 6 and notes that people of other cultures often don't know about the contributions African Americans have made to our society.
I guess knowing, like, more of the Black history people here, like some of the people that, like, we talk about, like Malcolm X and all that, I learned from school and then bring back home to the people.
All All four plan to attend college, and all agree that the lessons learned during Black History Month have shaped the way they lead in the community.
Like, I'm not going to agree with everything somebody says, and they're not going to agree with everything I say, but I think it's nice to lock in with different cultures and see how different people see things or imagine them.
That's 100% fair. I believe that is really true, and I think understanding it just gives you like you can relate. Like, I wouldn't say I can relate with everyone here, but at least I can know like where they're coming from, and like I can see their viewpoint.
I'd say it helped me. Not being like one-sided to it and knowing all of it and learning more about it, and becoming a leader as a Black person in history, having that knowledge of the people that have come before me and the people that have persevered.
When we're learning about Black history, it's learning about like, well, how has this event affected like the overall story of like America or, you know, the world. And I think that without learning about Black history, we wouldn't really have that, and we would be very one-track minded and very tunnel visioned in how we think about how our country became.
That's our show for this evening. We say thanks to the leaders we spoke to, but to all of those who are part of this cause we have not had a chance to talk to, we certainly say keep doing what you're doing. I'm Larry Smith for all of us here at LEX18. Thanks for joining us tonight. Enjoy your evening.
LEX18, streaming local news 24/7. Search for LEX18 on your device.